Alrighty, let's start. So we left off in the middle of a Tosafot, but I first want to um, go over what we did in that Tosafot. Um, and I'll warn, this Tosafot that we're in the middle of right now, and the next few Tosafotim are a little bit difficult. I say that not to scare you, but to encourage you to stick with it, and please don't hesitate if you have questions. I'm going to zoom in a little also to make it bigger. Alrighty. So we're discussing in this Tosafot the Mishnah, and specifically the fact that the Mishnah had something interesting in it, which bothered the Tosafot, which is that it says Erev Pesachim samuch lemincha lo yochal adam ad shetechshach. It says on Erev Pesach, on the eve of Pesach, samuch lemincha, right, which we explain means from the 9th halachic hour. Lo yochal adam ad shetechshach. A person should not eat until it gets dark. So Tosfot are specifically bothered by these words ad shetechshach. Okay, and as we've already seen, if you didn't know it already, Tosfot are very, very careful readers of the Gemara and the Mishnah. And they notice, logically, this is not really a phrase that's necessary, ad shetechshach, because we know that the whole reason that it's asur to eat on Erev Pesach, we said, was in order that you could eat matzah with an appetite. And we know that the time to eat matzah is once the night begins. So mimela, automatically, once the time to eat matzah begins, which is, you make kiddush, you do your seder, you eat matzah, and everything's good. That's when the ban on eating was going to end. Nobody thought that the ban on eating was going to last forever, right? We didn't need the Mishnah to tell us, okay, guys, stop eating from samuch lemincha, stop eating from the 9th hour to make sure that you have a big appetite for the seder, and make sure that you don't continue to not eat until after it gets dark. Once it gets dark, you could start eating again. Who thought otherwise, right? Why do we need the Mishnah to tell us once it's dark you could start eating? So that's what's bothering Tosafot. These words ad shetechshach. So the Tosafot were right here in Dibura Matchil ad shetechshach. They say makshim. The question is asked: Amai itzrich ad shetechshach? Why do we need those words ad shetechshach? Peshita, it's obvious. It's obvious that when we're talking about a prohibition to eat on Erev Pesach, that's going to end once it gets dark and the holiday begins. We don't need the Mishnah to tell us the end of the prohibition. We just need the Mishnah to tell us the start of the prohibition, and then we'll figure out the rest. Why did the Mishnah tell us the end of the prohibition is once it gets dark? That's question number one. The odd, second part of the same question, in the Gemara, Gabe Shabbatot v'Yamim Tovim, when it quotes the Braita regarding the law of Shabbat and Yom Tov, La katanile, it does not use those words ad shetechshach. Let's just take a peek into the Gemara. We didn't learn this yet, but this is what Tosfot are referencing. The Gemara quotes a Braita, which is Tanya. A Braita teaches, Lo yochal adam b'arve Shabbatot v'Yamim Tovim min hamincha ulemala. A person is not permitted to eat on Erev Shabbat and Erev Yom Tov from Mincha and onwards. Notice it doesn't give the end time. It's missing the words ad shetechshach, right? If this Braita was mirroring our Mishnah, it would have said, Lo yochal adam b'arve Shabbatot v'Yamim Tovim min hamincha ulemala ad shetechshach. But it doesn't. So Tosafot point out that our Mishnah has these words ad shetechshach, but the Beraita right here, which is conveying the same halacha that we're conveying here, just in our Mishnah we're talking about Erev Pesach, and in the Beraita we're talking about Shabbat and the other Yamim Tovim. There in our Mishnah it says ad shetechshach, but in the Beraita it doesn't say ad shetechshach. So Tosafot say, A, it's seemingly unnecessary. It's obvious that that's when you could start eating again. We don't need the Mishnah to tell us the end time that you're once again allowed to start eating. It's obvious. And second of all, in the Braita, which the Gemara itself quotes, it doesn't put the end time. So why did the Mishnah have to put the end time and the Braita did not? Okay, so are Tosfot's questions clear? It's a two-part question, but the question is the same. Why are these words ad shetechshach in our Mishnah? A, they're unnecessary. B, the Braita, which conveys a similar halacha, does not contain those words. That is Tosafot's question. Right? Any questions on Tosafot's question?
One question. In the Braita that the Gemara quoted, it says, Lo yochal min ha-mincha ulmala. And Tosafot are talking about the superfluous words in our Mishnah, Ad shetechshach. Isn't ulmala seemingly superfluous as well? Because like you said, you know that once you hit the mealtime, they don't need to tell you to resume to eat or to begin eating.
Excellent question. So the Gemara later is going to discuss the potential that the words min ha-mincha are different than the word samuch lemincha, right? We have in our Mishnah the word samuch lemincha, and in the Braita we have min ha-mincha u'lemala. The Gemara is going to discuss a little bit about the potential for those being different things, but for now, let's assume that they're the same. But yeah, it's a good question. The Gemara will address it, but excellent reading of the differences between the Mishnah and the Braita. The Gemara exactly picks up on what you're picking up, but Tosfot for now they're not gonna use that to answer their question here. But yes, that is another difference between the Mishnah and the Braita, which the Gemara is going to point out. And in fact, in a minute you'll see why what you're saying is important. So let's see the answer inside. So Tosfot give their first answer. Ve'omer hari mikorvil. The ri mikorvil says, Korvil is a place. Degabe masa davka ba'inan ad shetechshach. It was specifically by the mitzvah of masa, which is what's being discussed in our Mishnah, that the Mishnah had to tell us that it ends ad shetechshach, that the prohibition to eat ends once it gets dark, and then you're allowed to start eating matzah, but only once it gets dark can you start eating matzah. Why? Hidetanya batosefta, as is taught in the Tosefta, ha-pesach u'masa u'maror, mitzvatan mishetechshach. The Korban Pesach and the Masa and the Maror that accompany it, the mitzvah, the halacha is to eat it once it gets dark. The ta'ama mishum dichtiv, the reason is because it says in the pasuk, v'achlu et habasar balayla hazeh. You will eat the meat on this night. So we see that the pasuk made a specific halacha that the Korban Pesach has to be eaten after nightfall. So Tosfot's answer, the first answer from the Rimi Korvil is that the reason that our Mishnah said ad shetechshach is to teach you this halacha, that there's a difference between Shabbat and Yom Tov versus Pesach. Pesach on one side and Shabbat and Yom Tov on the other side. Pesach, you can't start early, you can't make early Pesach, you got to wait until nightfall. But Shabbat and Yom Tov, you're allowed to do it early. Okay? And they say, Umasal maror itkashu lePesach. The pasuk says you have to eat the Korban Pesach at night. And Masa and Maror are connected to the Korban. Aval su'udat Shabbat v'yamim tovim. The meal that we eat on Shabbat and Yom Tov, Maseh achilehu. It is permitted to eat them, mi be'od yom, while it's still daytime. Keda'amar be'perek Tfilat HaShachar, as is taught in Tfilat HaShachar, right, in Masechet Berachot. Mitpalel adam shel Shabbat be'erev Shabbat. A person could pray the Friday night prayer on Friday afternoon. Ve'omer kiddush hayom mi be'od yom, and say the kiddush for the night while it's still daytime. All right, exactly like we do, especially in the summer. Okay, so that is Tosfot's first answer from the Rimi Korvil. Again, question: why does it have to say in our Mishnah that ad shetechshach, that the prohibition to eat on Erev Pesach ends once it gets dark? Answer: to emphasize that you're not allowed to start the seder until after it's dark. Okay, that's untrue of Shabbat and Yom Tov, and that's why the Braita, which was discussing Shabbat and Yom Tov, did not have those key words ad shetechshach, but our Mishnah, which is discussing Matzah, does have those key words ad shetechshach. Ad shetechshach signals to us, the reader, that it's not to say that we would have thought, oh, you have to stop eating forever, right? We wouldn't have thought, oh, the Mishnah says stop eating on Erev Pesach, so that means I'm never allowed to eat the rest of my life. No, it's telling us that when is the stop time that you're once again allowed to start eating? That is ad shetechshach. Why? Because that's when eating matzah becomes permitted. And once eating matzah becomes permitted, that's when eating becomes permitted. But before that, no eating. After that, yes, eating. But don't try and eat earlier. You can't start eating the matzah until it gets dark. That's Tosfot's first answer. So any questions, again, on either Tosfot's question or the first answer that they bring from the Ri Mikorvil? No, we're good? No, it's a lot of information, and it's only going to get worse. So buckle your seatbelts. So the Tosfot now are going to move on to a new question, which is, this is why I said what you said is important, Isaac, because the Gemara itself is going to ask a question, which we didn't see yet. And Tosfot assumed that we know what that question is. So let's just take a second to understand what the Gemara's upcoming question is going to be. The Gemara's upcoming question is going to be, why does our Mishnah single out Erev Pesach? Right? It says, Arveh Pesachim samuch lemincha, lo yochal adam ad shetechshach. On Erev Pesach, close to Mincha time, a person's not allowed to eat until it gets dark. The Gemara is going to ask this question right here in yellow. Merkava color codes it for us, right? Yellow is a question. My irya arveh pesachim. Why are you signaling out arveh pesachim, author of the Mishnah? Why are you doing that? Afilu arveh shabbatot veyamim tovim nameh. This halacha that you're not allowed to eat from Mincha onwards applies on Erev Shabbat and Erev Yom Tov as well. So the Gemara is going to ask in a moment, why is the Mishnah singling out Erev Pesach when this Braita says right here, Arveh Shabbatot v'Yamim Tovim. Same halacha applies on Shabbat and Yom Tov. So why did Pesach get a special Mishnah? Right, the Braita already says Yom Tov. It could have been included in that umbrella. Is Pesach not a Yom Tov? It is. So when the Braita says all Erev Shabbats and all Erev Yom Tovs, you're not allowed to eat, that covered our bases. Why do we need a special Mishnah here in our Masechet Pesachim, signaling out Pesach and saying, oh, guys, don't eat on Erev Pesach? What do you mean? We weren't going to eat anyway. It was an Erev Yom Tov. We knew that we couldn't eat on Erev Yom Tov. So why do we need the Mishnah to signal out Erev Pesach? Okay, so that's going to be the Gemara's question. So now, Tosfot, as they always do, they say the following. They try and figure out why the Gemara did not say certain things, right? There's one type of commentary which explains what was said. That's Rashi. Rashi tells us what the Gemara says. The Tosafot explain why the Gemara did not say what it didn't say. So if the Gemara didn't say something, Tosafot tell us why they didn't say something. Okay, Tosafot is the next level. Rashi tells us, the Gemara says this, he tells us what it means. Tosafot, if the Gemara did not say something, Tosafot explained that to us. That's the deeper level of Tosfot's commentary. So Tosfot, they say as follows. Right here. Ve'omer Morenu Harav Yechiel. Rabbeinu Yechiel, we already quoted him once last week. Right? Rabbeinu Yechiel is one of the Baalei Tosfot. And Rabbeinu Yechiel is being quoted in this by this Tosfot here as well. Just going to bracket where we are so that everyone can see. Okay. Ve'omer Morenu Harav Yechiel. Rabbeinu Yechiel says, the ki parich b'Gemara, that when the Gemara is going to ask, my irya arveh pesachim v'chule, why are you signaling out arveh pesachim? Right, when the Gemara is going to ask that question, lo maseh l'shinuyeh, the Gemara could not have answered the nakat arveh pesachim mishum deba lemitne ad shetechshach. They say the Gemara could not have answered to the question, why are you signaling out Erev Pesach in the Mishnah, that the reason is because on Erev Pesach you have to wait till nightfall, versus Shabbat and Yom Tov that you don't have to wait until nightfall. The Gemara could not answer like that. Again, so spoiler, the Gemara is not going to give that as an answer. The Gemara is going to ask, why does the Mishnah signal out Pesach? Why does it single out Pesach? And then it gives a bunch of different answers. What's different about Pesach than other holidays? That our Mishnah had to signal out Pesach. One of the things that it suggests for why Pesach was singled out in our Mishnah is not what the Tosafot just said, which is that Pesach has something that's stricter about it than all the other holidays, which is that you have to wait until it gets dark to start. So you might ask the Tosafot, what you're saying is true, that the reason that it says Ad Shetechshach in our Mishnah is to teach us that you're not allowed to do the Seder until it gets dark. Then why did the Gemara not suggest that as one of the differences between our Mishnah, which talks about Pesach, and the Braita, which talks about other Yamim Tovim? If what you're saying is true, then why didn't the Gemara say it? Why didn't the Gemara suggest that as a difference? So Rabbeinu Yechiel is saying, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about the fact that the Gemara did not suggest what we're saying as a potential difference between Pesach and the other Yamim Tovim. Why? He says, Dikvar ashma'inan be'ezehu mikoman. Because we already learned this halacha in Perek Ezehu Mikoman in Masechet Zevachim. Right? For those who, maybe Elliot, you know this because you say korbanot in shul on Shabbat. But for those that say korbanot, this is a familiar Mishnah from Masechet Zevachim, which says, the Katani, which teaches about the Pesach, HaPesach enona echal ela balayla. Right? If you say korbanot before Shacharit, one of the korbanot that we mentioned is the korban Pesach. And one of the halachot of the Korban Pesach is Eno ne'echal ela balayla. It's only eaten at night. Right? That's a quote. When we read the Korbanot in the Tefillah, that's a quote from the actual Mishnah in Masechet Zevachim, which is found in Perek Ezehu Mikoman. Right? Ezehu Mikoman shel Zevachim. That's how it starts. Again, if you're familiar with the prayer, that those words Ezehu Mikoman are familiar to you. But that's the name of the Perek because that's how the first Mishnah in the Perek begins. So the Tosafot say, Rabbeinu Yechiel says, why does the Gemara not say that the reason that our Mishnah singled out Erev Pesach is because we need to learn the halacha that you can't start Pesach until it gets dark? Maybe that's the whole reason that our Mishnah singled out Erev Pesach from all the other holidays. So Rabbeinu Yechiel says, no, the Gemara didn't suggest that because it's not true. Because we actually have a better Mishnah in Masechet Zevachim, which says, right, black on white, it says, the Katani ha-Pesach eno nachal ela balayla. You cannot eat the Korban Pesach until nightfall. Okay? So Tosafot deflected a potential question. Again, this is very confusing because Tosafot are telling us what the Gemara did not say and why the Gemara did not say it. And why are Tosafot doing that? To defend themselves. Okay? Remember the chain of events here. Tosafot want to say that what does Ad Shetechshach accomplish? Why does Ad Shetechshach accomplish? It accomplishes teaching us that you can't eat the Masah until it gets dark. But then they ask, well, if that's true, then why, when the Gemara asked what's special about Pesach that our Mishnah had to single it out versus the other holidays, why didn't the Gemara answer? Well, it's because all the other holidays you're allowed to start them before it gets dark, and Pesach you have to wait until it gets dark. So the Tosafot answered, Rabbeinu Yechiel answers for the Tosafot, no, because we didn't need a whole Mishnah to do that. We didn't need a whole Mishnah to single out Pesach just to teach us that halacha, because we actually already knew that halacha from the Mishnah in Masechet Zevachim from Ezehu Mikoman, which says, Pesach eno echal ela balayla. Okay? So that's Rabbeinu Yechiel answering potential question number one. Potential rejection of Tosafot number one. Rabbeinu Yechiel deflects it by saying, no, we actually don't worry about the fact that the Gemara here does not say this halacha, because the Mishnah there in Masechet Zevachim already says it. So far, so good? Everyone's with me? It's a lot of steps here. Okay, we have the Tosafot's question. We have the Ri's answer. And then we have Rabbeinu Yechiel's defense of the Ri's answer. Okay? Now we're going to have another potential question that the Tosafot are going to deflect. The next potential question that the Tosafot are going to deflect is, okay, so then if we already have a Mishnah in Masechet Zevachim that teaches us the Korban Pesach has to be eaten at night, then what do we need this Mishnah for? Why do we need the words Ad Shetechshach? Take out the words Ad Shetechshach. Right? Go back to our original question. If the whole point of the Ad Shetechshach is to teach us that you can't eat the Masah until it gets dark, but now we're saying there's a Mishnah Masechet Zevachim that says that. And therefore we can't say that the whole purpose of our Mishnah is to teach us that you can't eat the matzah until it gets dark. Well, then why, what is Ad Shetechshach doing? So they say, the hacha here, why do we put the words Ad Shetechshach? Agav orche. It was by the way. Tinaya bikoser. We taught it in short. Meaning, we taught the main place where we taught the halacha that you're not allowed to eat matzah or the korban pesach until it gets dark. That's in Masechet Zevachim. But we're talking about Erev Pesach here, so we just threw out a hint. By the way, a reminder: you can't do it until it gets dark. What is that? Ad Shetechshach. Okay, so excuse me. The main function of our Mishnah, the main purpose of our Mishnah, is to single out Erev Pesach. Why are we singling out Erev Pesach? We don't know yet. The Gemara didn't tell us yet. The Gemara is going to ask the question and give us an answer. Tosafot say, is a potential answer because you're not allowed to eat until it gets dark? No. That's not a potential answer of why Korban Pesach, why Pesach as a holiday is being singled out here, because we actually have a Mishnah in Masechet Zevachim. So then why did we mention Ad Shetechshach, which teaches us that you can't eat the Korban Pesach until it gets dark? Because it's by the way. We were talking about Pesach anyway, so we threw in two words that remind us of that halacha, even though that halacha is mainly taught in Masechet Zevachim. Okay? So to summarize a super confusing Tosafot, question: what are the words Ad Shetechshach doing here? Answer: they're teaching us that you can't eat the matzah until it gets fully dark. But other holidays and Shabbat, you're allowed to start even before it gets fully dark. Okay? Now, Tosafot had two potential questions that you could have asked on them. They deflected both of those questions. Okay, but the main point to extract from here is that according to the Tosafot, on Erev Pesach, you're not allowed to start your Seder until nightfall. Erev Shabbat and Erev Yom Tov, you're allowed to start before nightfall. Good? Okay, awesome. Anybody brave enough to try and repeat some of what we just said?
From the beginning of Tosafot or from where?
From the beginning of the Tosafot. The question, the answer, and the two potential questions and the deflections.
So Tosafot, they preempt the question of why do we have Ad Shetechshach in our Mishnah? And the first answer given by the Rimi Korvil is because we can't have matzah, maror, and korban pesach until night. It's a mitzvah to eat it at night. And as opposed to Shabbat and Yom Tov, the other Shabbat and Yom Tovim where you can take in Shabbat or Yom Tovim early, you can't do that by Pesach because of the eating. And then Rav Yechiel defends the Ri's answer by saying that you can't take in Pesach early. And then afterwards it says, so then Rav Yechiel quotes the Mishnah in Zvachim that says Ad Shetechshach, that fulfills the need for Ad Shetechshach there. So they ask on Rav Yechiel, so then why do we need Ad Shetechshach in our Mishnah here if it mentions it in Zvachim? So the Tosafot answer, it's by the way, since we were talking about Pesach, we mentioned Ad Shetechshach as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Isaac. Awesome. I just want to add one thing. It's just what was Rabbi Yechiel defending when he brought the Mishnah in Zevachim was he was saying that the Gemara is going to ask, why does our Mishnah single out Pesach? And if what Tosafot is saying is true, if what the Rimi Korvil is saying is true, that a difference between Pesach and other holidays is that Pesach you have to start after nightfall, but the other holidays you could start before nightfall, then why did the Gemara offer that as a suggestion about why our Mishnah singled out Erev Pesach from all the other holidays? So to that he answered, because that's not the purpose of our Mishnah. There's actually a different Mishnah whose purpose it is to do that, which is in Zevachim. Okay? So then we said, but why bring it at all? Exactly like you said, Isaac. No, we said just by the way, right? Bekotzer. In short, it's a teeny halacha that we mentioned because we were talking about it anyway. Okay? So this was all in the Rimi Korvil's world, where he gave his answer to the question, which was that, again, Pesach, you cannot start until after dark, but the other holidays you can start before it gets dark. Okay, we're going to see Rabbeinu Yehuda has a totally different view of things here. Rabbeinu Yehuda says as follows. Scroll a little bit. Reset. Okay. We're right here. Rabbeinu Yehuda. But Rabbeinu Yehuda tiretz. Rabbeinu Yehuda answers the question differently, and he says, Afilu iba'inan gabe Shabbatot v'yamim tovim ad shetechshach. Even if we were going to require, just like Pesach, on Shabbat and Yom Tov ad shetechshach. So he says, Rabbeinu Yehuda says, we're going to require that for Shabbat, for Yom Tov, and for Pesach, just like all the other holidays, you have to wait until after it gets fully dark. Okay. Well, if that's true, then what do we do with Ad Shetechshach, right? That was the whole thing of the Rimi Korvil, who said, Ad Shetechshach teaches us that you can't start your Seder until nightfall. So Rabbeinu Yehuda is saying, no, don't worry about that. He says, Hacha itztrich lemitnye. We would still need our Mishnah to say the words Ad Shetechshach. De'ata la'ashmu'inan. It's coming to teach us the afagav de-shechitat pesachim ba'od yom. Even though the Korban Pesach is slaughtered during the day, right? We slaughter the Pesach from Chatzot and onwards. Eno ne'echal mi ba'od yom kishar kadashim. It's not permitted to be eaten during the day, like the other Korbanot, right? Other Korbanot, you're permitted to eat them during the day. Korban Pesach, even though we slaughter it during the day, you're not permitted to eat it during the day. Okay? So Rabbeinu Yehuda says, I don't agree with the Rimi Korvil or Rabbeinu Yechiel's answer. The reason we need Ad Shetechshach is to teach us that don't forget that the Korban Pesach has to be eaten at night. Why would we forget that the Korban Pesach has to be eaten at night? Because we slaughter it during the day, and all other Korbanot are allowed to eat. You're allowed to eat it during the day. So we might have gotten confused. So we need our Mishnah to reiterate, to reemphasize that it's Ad Shetechshach. Don't eat the Masa until after it gets dark, because you're not allowed to eat the Korban Pesach until it gets dark, and the Korban Pesach, you might have gotten confused and thought you could eat during the day, because other Korbanot you could eat during the day, and you're also allowed to slaughter the Korban Pesach during the day. So he says, therefore, we needed our Mishnah to emphasize Ad Shetechshach. Okay? And he brings one final proof to what he says. V'chen yesh b'Yerushalmi, b'Resh Pirkin. In the Gemara Yerushalmi, it says in the beginning of the Perek, Tane, they teach, Erev Shabbat, min hamincha ulemala, lo yitom klum ad shetechshach. They have taught in the Yerushalmi exactly like we have regarding our Mishnah. They have regarding Shabbat also. That min hamincha ulemala, lo yitom klum ad shetechshach. Do not eat anything until it gets fully dark. So we see Rabbeinu Yehuda is saying that unlike what the Rimi Korvil said, he thinks that even on Shabbat and Yom Tov, a person is not permitted to eat until it gets dark. So the idea of early Shabbat, according to Rabbeinu Yehuda, is a no-no. You got to wait until it gets fully dark. Okay, so let's summarize this. Let's summarize this Tosafot. My trusty whiteboard going. Okay, so on the one hand we have the first answer, which is the Rimi Korvil. Okay, the Rimi Korvil says that, why does it say Ad Shetechshach? Ellie doesn't like when I write Hebrew words in English, but it's a hassle to write in Hebrew. Okay, why does it say Ad Shetechshach? It says Ad Shetechshach because it's teaching us Pesach, you cannot start until it's dark, unlike Shabbat and Yom Tov. Okay? That's the Rimi Korvil. Rabbeinu Yehuda disagrees. Rabbeinu Yehuda says, Ad Shetechshach is Pesach and all Shabbat and holiday and Yom Tov there, I'll say Yom Tov here. All Shabbat and Yom Tov, you cannot eat until dark. Okay? So why does it say the words Ad Shetechshach? Don't think you're allowed to eat korban during the day. Okay? So he says, what is the purpose of Ad Shetechshach? It's so that you don't think that you're allowed to eat the korban Pesach during the day, even though we slaughter it during the day, and all other korban you're allowed to eat during the day. Ad Shetechshach reminds you, don't eat the korban Pesach during the day. And he says there's no difference between Pesach, Shabbat, and Yom Tov in this regard. He thinks all of them, you have to wait until it's fully dark to eat. So we see in terms of the halacha, there's a big difference, right? They're arguing over how to explain two words in our Mishnah, just two words. But there's a huge difference in terms of how they interpret the halacha based on this. According to the Rimi Korvil, on a Shabbat, you're allowed to make early Shabbat. You don't have to wait until 8:30. Well, really, Seta Kochavim is even later. 8:50, 9 o'clock, depending on who you go by, right? If you have to wait until Seta Kochavim to make Kiddush, that's crazy, right? But Rabbeinu Yehuda says, no, you do. You have to wait until Seta Kochavim to make Kiddush, even on a regular Shabbat or Yom Tov. Of course, our custom is that we follow the Rimi Korvil, right? We do make early Shabbat and early Yom Tov, but on Pesach we wait. We do wait to make sure that it's after dark because of the Pesukim that the Tosafot quoted, right? That there's another pasuk that says Be'erev tochlu matzot, but the Pesukim they quote here, and the Mishnah that we quoted about the Korban Pesach, that the Pesach is only eaten at night, we wait on Pesach. But other Shabbats and Yom Tov, we follow the Rimi Korvil, and we're lenient that we make Kiddush early. Right? Rabbeinu Yehuda, though, would disagree with what we're doing. He would say, you guys should be waiting till Seta Kochavim every Shabbat, every Yom Tov, and of course on Pesach. The Rimi Korvil says, no, Pesach is different than all the other ones. We have special Mishnayot, special Pesukim that teach us that you have to wait until it gets dark. But a regular Shabbat, we know the Gemara Masechet Berachot says explicitly, you're allowed to make Kiddush early on Friday night, which is what the Rimi Korvil quoted. So there's plenty to rely on from the Rimi Korvil, and that is, of course, our custom until today. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns about this machloket between the Rimi Korvil and Rabbeinu Yehuda? No, we're good? Awesome. Okay. Now, this next Tosafot is, these next two Tosafot are actually going to be a little bit smoother, followed by a very brutal one. So let's enjoy the peace while it lasts. So this Tosafot is focusing on the words, the afilu ani shebi Yisrael lo yochal ad sheyasev. Right, if we take a peek back into our Mishnah, right, we said the second sentence of our Mishnah right here, afilu ani shebi Yisrael, even a poor person, lo yochal ad sheyasev, should not eat until he's leaning, right? Right, we explained why you're obligated to lean, because it shows that you're free. But Tosafot are going to ask, what is this line, afilu ani shebi Yisrael? What is this line right here? Even a poor person, right? Why would we have thought otherwise? What, just because the guy's poor means he doesn't have to keep one of the mitzvot? What's the difference between a poor man's obligation in leaning and a regular person's obligation in leaning? Just because the guy doesn't have money in his bank account, it means he wouldn't have to lean? Who would have thought otherwise? Okay. So let's see. So Tosfot say, Tisalka da'atach, you might have thought that the reason, you might have thought that an ani does not have to lean. Why? The hesebat ani la chashiva heseba. You might have thought his leaning doesn't count. Why? The in-law amal lehasev. He doesn't have what to lean on, right? He doesn't have a comfortable couch. He doesn't have comfortable pillows and chairs. So he's leaning on like on a folding chair. So maybe his leaning doesn't count. Ve'en zeh derech cherut. This is not considered the way of a free person. It's not like a king to sit in that way. So you might have thought that a poor person, therefore, is patur. He's not obligated to lean because he doesn't have a comfortable, fancy way of leaning. Comes the Mishnah and tells us, no. Even a poor person is still obligated to lean, and he leans however he can. He does his best, even if it's not comfortable for a regular person. That's how Tosfot explain what we call the siluk dat, what you might have thought. Why does the Mishnah have to go out of its way to teach us that even a poor person has to lean? Again, they say because you might have thought that the leaning of a poor person doesn't count because it's not comfortable, and therefore he's patur. Comes the Mishnah and teaches you, no, a poor person is still obligated to lean. That's the first answer of Tosafot. Okay, that's a pretty cut and dry explanation. Again, if you look back at our Mishnah, they're emphasizing the words afilu anish b'Yisrael, even a poor person. Why would we have thought otherwise? Why couldn't the Mishnah just say every Jewish person must lean? Why is it even a poor person? Because even a poor person who doesn't have a comfortable way of leaning still has to lean. You might have thought it's only if I have comfortable pillows and chairs. Comes the Mishnah and tells you, no, everybody, including a poor person, have to lean, even if it's uncomfortable. That's Tosfot's first answer. Second answer, they say, v'yesh mefarshim, some explain, te'adil ka'eh. That it's actually, the words, afilu anisha b'Yisrael, are explaining what came previously. What do they mean? Now, until now, what have we been doing? We've been putting a period here, period. Period. Okay? That's what we've been saying until now. That was the first answer of Tosafot. Two separate sentences. Tosafot now suggests, actually, let's move the period. And the sentence should read like this. Erev Pesachim samuch lemincha, lo yochal adam ad shetechshach afilu anisha b'Yisrael. Period. Lo yochal ad sheyesev. New sentence. New halacha. What does the sentence mean if we read it with the period over here? How does that change the meaning of the sentence? What do you guys think? Anyone brave enough to take a stab?
Well, it comes to include, it says, afilu anisha b'Yisrael.
Okay, include them in what?
People that are not allowed to eat ad shetechshach.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, that's Tosfot's second answer. They say that even a poor person is not going on the halacha of leaning, right? Lo yochal ad sheyesev. It's going on the halacha of not eating until it gets dark. Okay, they say it's going on the law of ad shetechshach, of not eating ad shetechshach. So let's see that inside. These dots. Okay. So let's see that inside. The Tosfot say right here, v'yesh mefarshim de'adil el ka'eh. It's going on the previous sentence, ad shetechshach, until it gets dark. V'afilu anisha b'Yisrael, and even a poor person also can't eat until it gets dark. Perush, meaning afilu ani, even a poor person, shelo achal kama yamim, even a poor person who hasn't eaten in several days, so he might be starving, and also it's probably not going to affect his appetite so much if he eats a little bit. Lo yochal ad shetechshach. Also, he can't eat until it gets dark. Okay, so the second way of explaining it, we move the period, and we say the afilu, the even, is telling you, even a poor person who hasn't eaten in a long time, he's starving, we still make him wait until after nightfall to eat. We don't let him eat on Erev Pesach. You might have thought that since he hasn't eaten in a few days, he's permitted to eat samuch lemincha. Comes the Mishnah and teaches us, no, he's not allowed, just like everybody else. Okay, so Tosafot, we understand what afilu anisha b'Yisrael, even a poor person. If the Mishnah is saying even a poor person has to do X, then we have to explain why we would have thought they don't have to do it, right? If the Mishnah is going out of its way to tell us why the Aniyim have to do something, we have to understand who would have thought otherwise, why we might have questioned that. So in the first explanation, they say, why would we have questioned why an ani has to lean? Why does it have to say even a poor person has to lean? Because it's uncomfortable. So you might have thought they're patur from leaning because the way they lean is not comfortable anyway. Comes the Mishnah and teaches us, no. Afilu ani, even a poor person. The second explanation says, no, move the period. Put it here instead. Put it over here instead. And now the sentence reads, on Erev Pesach samuch lemincha, a person should not eat until it gets dark, even a poor person. Meaning even poor people are not allowed to eat samuch lemincha on Erev Pesach. Why would we have thought that they are allowed? Because they haven't eaten in a few days. So they're probably starving. And also, it's not going to affect their appetite if they eat a little bit now because they haven't eaten in days. So even if they eat now, who cares? Comes the Mishnah and teaches us, no. Even a poor person who hasn't eaten in a few days still is not allowed to eat until it gets dark. Okay, so those are the two possibilities according to the Tosafot. Again, either period over here, or fix that out, right? And period over here. Those are the two possibilities according to the Tosafot. Anybody brave enough to repeat that Tosafot? The two possibilities of where we put the period. I'll give you remote control of my mouse so that you could draw where the periods go. Anybody other than Isaac brave enough? How about you, Elliot? All right. You now have control of the mouse.
Okay. So Tosafot brings down two explanations where he'll have access.
If you move your mouse, it'll move my mouse.
Alrighty, okay, I see.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so Tosafot thinks there's two explanations of how Afilu Ani B'Yisrael goes. One goes right here, and one goes right here.
Okay, and what does each one mean?
Okay, so the first one means that the one that goes by Achet Tikshach Afilu Ani B'Yisrael, the one that goes right here, this means that even a poor person who hasn't eaten in a while still cannot eat, just like us.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is just Afilu Ani B'Yisrael Lo Yochal Ad She'Yisev, is that you would think that they wouldn't have to lean because there's nothing to really lean on for them, but really they have to lean anyways.
Awesome, fantastic. Okay, I see. My father asked, "What about an onen?" So, what about an onen? What's the question, Dad? If an onen can eat,
is an onen obligated to eat korban pesach at night?
I don't think so. I have to double check that, but I would think not. I think that the onen would do Pesach Sheni, but I have to look into that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So guys, thank you once again. I'll see everybody tomorrow night. If anybody has questions, feel free to stick around.